All right, so we're going to do a small review day video for test one. I don't normally do review day videos, but since this is our unit got messed up with the transition to online, I wanted to take the time to talk about some things, etc. So first, before you watch this video, if you have not done handout 4 partial review, do that now, then watch the video. There is the answer key on Canvas, and that way you can check your answers. And if you're getting something wrong, then when I go and make some comments on the video, they'll make more sense. I'm not going to redo handout 4 on this video, but I am going to talk about some of the problems. We're going to talk about the online test a little bit, and here is a list to remind you of everything in your notebook that you need to know for the test. So before I turn the laptop to me, maybe we'll go through this first. It's not the answer you want, but if someone asks me what do we need to know, I'm going to answer every single line of your notebook. Your notebook is defined by any lecture I've ever given, whether that was in person or through a video. So all the notes that go with that. I'm never going to waste your time giving you pages and pages of notes if I know you're not responsible for it for the test, period. I'm talking like I'm voice texting now. Now, obviously, I can't test you on everything, but we're trying to make statements about what you're responsible for. So remember at the very beginning we had all the categorical data, bar charts. Even before we started talking about categorical data, you had pages in your notes of definitions, discrete versus continuous, qualitative, quantitative, descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, stuff like that. Then we got into numerical data. We did dot plots, stem and leaf, histograms, and box plots. Box plots, of course, the IQR went with that. The IQR is the measure of variation for the median standard deviations. That was its own video. The measure of variation that goes with the mean sample standard deviation, population standard deviation. The word percentile, remember how it ends in ILE? That comes up in 2 different places. It came up in our quartiles, but if we're just doing Q1s and Q3s, all we could talk about was the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, or the 75th percentile. But then once we covered the empirical curve, we then, well, there were about 6 more percentiles, right? Let's see, the 0.15th percentile, the 2.5th percentile, the 16th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 84th percentile, the 97.5th percentile, and the 99.85th percentile. I just did that off the top of my head. Then we had mean word problems. There were 3 on the handout we did in class. There were 3 more on handout 3.5. I then did on the Tidy Up Day, your Math 220 grade, plus another whole problem. So that's 8 problems right there that you need to redo. Of course, we have empirical, handout 3, I think. Z-score word problems. I covered 3 complete word problems and how picky I am on the interpretation in that video. I do believe that just redoing those 3 and looking very specifically how I interpreted them is enough. And then there were a few times where we could get you to use the understanding of a z-score in the middle of the empirical problems. We also had means, median, skew, right skew, left skew, positive skew, negative skew. You do have to memorize those and how the mean and median relate. Of course, we had frequency and relative frequency, whether it was for categorical or numerical, basically all definitions. So basically everything we've done. Now, I did not want to have to reload the sheet. So this partial review is exactly that, partial. It just threw a few extra problems onto a piece of paper. This is by no means, oh, if I know everything on handout 4, I'm good for the test. That is not correct at all. I also, since we went online, I cut out a day's worth of lecture. So on handout 4, I assume if it's in front of you, you can see what I'm pointing to. It says extraneous, confounded, and it says 3 biases. You can scratch that off. Extraneous, confounded, 3 biases. We did not get to this semester, so you may cross those off. And this is, again, just reminding you of some stuff that's in your notebook. All right. Here I am. During the tidy up day, which for some of you could have been a week ago, depending on how you set your pace, I started talking about the test. I want to revisit some of that. Cut my phone off. I've forgotten to cut my phone off. All right. Biggest thing, and it will be on the directions before you ever start the test, you cannot use the Safari browser. Sometimes I need to upload a picture when I write the test, and my colleagues and I have found that using the Safari browser will not actually show you the picture. So you won't even know what I'm asking a question on. So do not use Safari when you're taking my test. Some of the tips I'm giving you right now is what I learned from students last April and some of the things that they were doing wrong. For a few students, I had half the test turned in and it was completely blank. And then they emailed me and said, I have all my scratch work in front of me. I just didn't have time to type it all. I can't accept scratch work from one student without accepting it from everyone. So the only thing that I can grade is what is turned in on the actual online test. So when I design the test, I will do my best to put the more weighted points, the heavier points towards the beginning of the test. You'll be able to go throughout the whole test, move back and forth between all the questions. But I'll try to put the ones that are worth more points towards the beginning. So again, don't spend a whole lot of time on questions that are only worth 2 and 3 and 4 points, right? There could be questions worth 15 points. But do a question if you're taking some, scratch paper, and then type your answer. And do that for each problem. Do not do 5 questions on your scratch paper first, telling yourself, oh, I'll make sure I leave time to go type it in, because inevitably you'll lose track of the timer and the test will turn itself in and you will not have typed your answers. So just, read a question, do some whatever you need to do on your scratch paper, type it in to the online test, then go on to the next one, same thing, on to the next one, same thing. Once you do all of that and you see you have extra time, well, always feel free to go back and check your work, right? Or if you wanted to maybe add a little more, to try to get partial credit or something like that in case your answer is wrong. It is open note, open book, no humans. No humans are allowed. And again, if students are confused and they're working together, very often one person takes the lead and tries to send the answer to their friends, and what gets typed into test is so easy to catch that someone cheated because the answer is beyond ridiculous. I won't give away all my clues, but I will take you to task if I feel like you have cheated on the test. So no humans allowed, but you can use anything else you want. I don't recommend that because it's going to take you too long. Study for my test just like you would if we were doing it in the classroom and you had 50 to 60 minutes. So that is how you're studying for it. You shouldn't want to have to flip through your notes very often, if at all. I'm looking at my own notes. Okay. Oh, there's a formal word for it. I stay online when y'all are taking your test. Oh, I think it's called moderate. So I am sort of there. So if there's any problems as you take the test, email me. I keep my email open so I can communicate with you that way. Don't email me 2 hours after the test. Oh, I had this issue. If I don't hear from you, I won't know there's a problem. Okay, I think I told you all of that. I've been mentioning the sheet of paper. It's already loaded in the test one handouts. Hopefully you've already looked at it, but if not, you definitely want to look at it now. Just some examples of how to write answers for a stats test since it is online. Now again, I didn't have to do every single thing like the well, no, I actually did that one. Definitions and things like that. You know, there's a way you'll be typing or fill in the blank, you know, leave out a word and you'll type the word. So I'm going to look at this, highlight some things. Yeah, you do not need to make complete sentences. You don't need to reword my question and then finally answer it. If there are parts, this came up in the spring, like A, B, and C, you don't get to just write 3 different answers and let me figure out what is for A, what is for B, what is for C, because then that makes grading incredibly difficult, and actually I will mark it all wrong. So you need to put A, you know, and then write your answer. B, write your answer. C, write your answer. Histogram. So I didn't give a data set here, but I think you can go with me. You're going to describe it to me. Oh, my intervals is 5 to 15 and it has a frequency of 10. My next interval, 15 to 25, it had a frequency of 8, etc. If I ask you about skew, then you could, you know, get a quick graph on your piece of paper so you'd be able to see it and say, oh yeah, it looks right skewed. But you're not actually physically going to show me a drawn out histogram in this type of test. The dentist box plot, so that's one you, on handout 1, you definitely want to redo. And once you redo it, look here to this sheet of paper to show you how you could describe that to me, because you've got to describe the box plot. It's not that hard. You're going to tell me what your Q1 is, median, and Q3. You're going to tell me your fences, right? Negative 82.5, and then positive 217.5 and 330. Then you're going to say, so 240 is a mild outlier. You're going to tell me what the whiskers extend to. I think in that case it was 15 and 150. If I ask you about skew, you could say I can tell right skew since the median is left of the center of the box and the right whisker is longer and there was a right outlier. So again, make sure you're reading that, and that describes what your box plot would have looked like if it was on a piece of paper. The empirical handout 3, I just kind of gave you an example. It was number 3 on handout 3. You're going to tell me your standard deviation. I do need to know your lines, that negative 3s, negative 2s, negative 1s, etc. So kind of showed you there. Again, have handout 3 out number 3 and you'll know what I'm talking about here. That is the way that will help you get partial credit also. Then, like, for example, part C, there was a little bit of algebra on that one. And, you know, it was like a fraction, so feel free to just use the fraction sign, setting that up, and you say, and then I got 36,000 as the answer. The other parts, of course, you're just going to simply answer me. Z-score word problem from lecture. That's how you could show me how you calculated the psych Z-score, then the math Z-score. Very specific interpretation. Both did well. Psych is better since its Z-score is furthest from 0. Mean word problem, I did one of the ones that we had done on the in-class handout. Again, I know that was a really ugly numerator divided by number equals something. So just using parentheses, I've shown you how you could type that. And then if you had time later, you could come and tell me a few more intermediate steps. But it's really, really, really important on something like this that you show me the setup. Because if you have the setup completely right and you mess up the final answer, yes, you're going to get points off, but I know that means either your math or your algebra is not very good. Showing me, where am I? The setup of the mean word problem is the most important because that's where the statistics skill comes in. Oh, and if I ask you to do a stem and leaf, you know, any type of bar, I don't really care. That, I mean, these are not ideal, right? But it's good enough for my online test. Again, do not use Safari. All right. All right, so you've done handout 4. I want to make some comments on this. All right, the stem and leaf should be, and have handout 4 out and my answer key too. I'm going to add a few pieces to one of these problems in a few minutes to give you a little more, but right now I just want to talk about the answer key. So the stem and leaf, I'm trying to remember all the questions that students asked me during review in the classroom. Okay, the stem and leaf. No, you do not have to put your leaves in order. Remember I said we're just using this as a visual, so what is on the answer key is perfectly fine. And remember the 0 is 0 tens, so that just represented the data points that were, you know, 9 and below. That's the easy guy. Let's talk about, well, the box plots, because there's 2 great examples here. Oh yes, sorry. Do not ever, 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 do not ever decide you're not going to use some data points that I give you on a test. If I give you a data set, you're using the full data set. Don't say, oh, I think I'm going to eliminate that big number because he's too big. You don't get to do that. So you have to use my full data sets. So when you did number 3, please make sure that you use the entire data set. This was a box plot. And, I mean, you can look at the answer key, but I wanted to point out something that's interesting. And this is it is what it is. I didn't mean for this to happen. This box plot does not have a whisker right there. Okay? Because as it turned out, once you did your outlier fences, one was at 130 and then 98.5. So 185, absolutely an extreme outlier, right? And then the 125 was a mild outlier. So now, looking at the data set, I was ready to figure out what the end of the whisker was. So I already used up 185. I already used up 125. 67 is my next highest data point. Okay. But look, 67 is Q3. So there's nowhere for the whisker to go. Do not describe a whisker there. There is not a whisker, because actually the end of the whisker and Q3 are the exact same number. So this happens sometimes in real life. You just don't have a whisker. I've seen graphs where there's no whiskers at all. I've seen graphs, box plots, where the median and Q3 are the same number, and you'll say the median and Q3 are whatever. So it's really hard to design a box plot to do everything that I want it to do. So usually I just try to grab a data set from a book. This is an example of me not asking you about skew. These are contradictory clues. Yes, we have high outliers, but then again, the median is to the right. So I would not ask you about skew on this one. But let's look at number 4. So the box plot, you could call number 4. He's just a great box plot to practice, right? If you do him start to finish, you should be good for my test. Make sure you put the data set in, do all of that, match my answer key. And there's not anything really interesting going on here. Which, though, once I look at it, this is an example of a data set that I could ask you to do a box plot and then describe the skew for me. This absolutely is right skew. How do I know? We got all 3 clues saying the same thing. The outliers are on the right. The median is to the left of the center. And then the right whisker is longer. How do I know that if I'm not drawing it to scale? Well, you have to subtract. What's 104 minus 34? I don't know, it's about 70. What's 374 minus 272? That's about 100. That's about 100. That's about 70. Right whiskers longer. So right whiskers longer, outliers on the right-hand side. The median is to the left of the center. That is absolutely one that is fair game to ask you about skew. Then we did the histogram, so number 5. I did not talk through on the answer key the guidelines. It looks like there's about 33 pieces of data, right? So step 1 says you should have about 6 intervals. Then max minus min, and I'll kind of, hold on, just in case anybody got confused, maybe help you figure out where you got confused at. If you do max minus min divided by 6, you'll get 214.5. You are welcome to count by 214. I feel like I just did something wrong, so hold on. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, I probably used 5 the first time. Yeah, you can use 5 or 6 intervals. If you use 5 intervals, you're probably going to count by 250, which is what I did on my answer key. If you chose to use 6 intervals, I would expect you probably would have counted by 200 or 210, which is perfectly fine. Yours may not look exactly like my answer key, but if you're counting by 200 or 210 or 250, you have done this appropriately. And if you started at 34, perfectly fine. This was cell phone contacts. Whether you have 34 or 30, I didn't think it was a big deal, so I backed up to 30 on my answer key. It made it easier to count. Again, I've probably just in the last 2 minutes told you 4 different ways you could have made this histogram. I only showed one way on my answer key. So I counted by 250. I started at 30, then I went to my data set and actually counted up. Remember, this table is called a frequency distribution. Also though, well, no, never mind. This is an example, definitely showing right skew. Okay. Oh, some people in class will ask me about the space right there. I call that's artistic. You don't have to leave the space there. That space is not to scale with the origin, like at 0. It's really an indentation. It's like when we write a Word document and some people leave thin margins or thicker margins. That's all that is. That is just a margin. Most books and computers will do it because it kind of just makes you focus in on the graph. Sometimes if your graph is butted up against the y-axis, it can just kind of be a little messy looking. So that's a personal preference. Yeah. Back to now. I am going to do number 1. Okay. So this is the empirical with some z-scores thrown in. So I'm going to turn this back towards the whiteboard. And we may add a few pieces to number 1 also. So even if you didn't got it right, still keep watching because I may do something more with it. Okay. Mean is 100. 16th percentile is 80. So remember the very first thing you do. You draw a nice big curve, you drop a line in the middle. Why am I frozen?